Welcome one, welcome all. Thank you for tuning in to Cedarly Radio, your guide to films playing at the Art House for the week of October 4th to October 10th. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Dave Huffman. On this week's episode, we'll be discussing Joker, Honeyland, and Before You Know It.
We'll also be discussing the difference in having a conversation after a film, either in person versus online, Dave's future cinema vigilante work at our local libraries, and our Cedarly 3 picks for great anti-hero films. Well, we always like to start off the show with a last scene first. So, Dave, what was the last film you've seen?
The last film I saw was a fantastically trashy 1975 exploitation movie called Cover Girl Models by Cirio H. Santiago. And it is, I can't believe I've never seen this movie before because I love films of this period. I love the whole aesthetic of it.
Yeah.
And it was just a gibberish movie about a fashion photographer taking 3 models to, like, as they kept referring to it in the film, the Orient. So they were going to, like, Hong Kong and Singapore and just doing, like, ridiculous photo shoots. But then there was also a little bit of, like, espionage, someone had, you know, like, microfilm stitched into one of the dresses, but the plot never really made any sense. It was just hilariously entertaining, and just, you know, everything about it was just really a lot of fun. So I'm very glad I watched it. It didn't really have any. It had Mary Warnov in a very small role, and Vic Diaz, who was in a lot of kind of women in prison movies of the period that were shot in the Philippines, but there weren't like name people in it.
Right.
It was just trashy good fun. So I was in the mood for something exactly like that, and that fit the bill very nicely.
That's a very specific film watching desire where you're like, I'm kind of in the mood for a women in prison 70s movie.
Well, they weren't in prison.
Well, right.
No,
but still,
I was like
that,
in the
yeah.
mood. I was in the mood for I was really in the mood for kind of like 70s drive-in sort of, you know, exploitation-y kind of movie. But this one wasn't. I mean, this was, you know, there was a lot of, you know, topless women in it and stuff, and gratuitous nudity, but it wasn't really as, you know, trashy and raunchy as a lot of other exploitation movies of the period. It was almost sort of like Sweet and Innocent, just with, you know, a lot of topless ladies in it, which is hardly the reason I was watching the movie, as we all know.
Right.
I kept taking pictures of the screen of the hilarious dresses that the women were wearing and sending those to friends, because that's how a gay guy watches an old 70s exploitation movie. And what was the last film you saw, Aaron?
So I'm trying to get prepared for a movie we'll be talking about shortly. So I went back because it's one of those I haven't rewatched that I think maybe twice ever. Is The King of Comedy, Martin Scorsese's film from '83, of course, starring De Niro, Jerry Lewis, and Bernhardt in a wonderfully unhinged role.
Yeah, she's great.
I don't know why I don't go back and rewatch this more often. Like, it's definitely doesn't seem as funny as it did to me the first time I saw it, like in college. Mm-hmm. It is odd that it's in the era of a different kind of PG rating, but really it's not terribly vulgar. There's really no, it's clean, like late night comedy kind of sense of humor. I mean, the actual comedy part, the tragic social commentary is still, obviously very relevant, but since it was referenced by Todd Phillips as one of his inspirations for Joker, I was like, well, this is a good time to go back and check out King of Comedy.
Sure.
So I thought of it as a quick public service to everyone listening that was maybe born, I'm going to say from like 2000 till now, or maybe even like late 90s till now. There was an era, I'm going to say it was pre-Rocky and Bullwinkle for Robert De Niro, where he put in four strong decades of just stellar performances. So let's not focus on maybe like the post-2000s. It's been a little rough going with some of the roles he's taken over the years. But if you go back through his filmography, it's jaw-dropping for 4 decades. And then we're in the current De Niro climate. Hopefully that changes with The Irishman, but, time will tell.
Well, The Irishman, I just rewatched the trailer for The Irishman yesterday, and I was like, this is the most Martin Scorsese movie I've ever seen in my life. So if it delivers on what that trailer promises, it's going to be fantastic. So
I kind of wonder, though, because there's obviously a built-in audience for him. Is that the way they put together a trailer to make it seem like, the most Scorsese movie that he's made in a while? Or, you know what I mean? Like, do you put together that style of trailer because you know who the director is? Or, because you don't really want to misrepresent the movie? Because heard some early buzz about it that it's, you know, it's not like a Casino Goodfellas kind of story. It is kind of like methodical and takes its time and you know, builds and also covers like this huge era.
Yeah, I was going to say with that running time, it's got to take its time. So
Right. So one of the movies that we just booked, I wanted to mention this week because it has a really fascinating story because it's been around for a while, and based on the actors, I was like, I'm really looking forward to seeing this movie. We have booked The Current War, the director's cut, October 25th. This is about Thomas Edison versus Westinghouse and Tesla, and it was a movie that premiered at Toronto in 2017, and then it just kind of disappeared. It got caught up in the whole breaking of the Harvey Weinstein allegations and the Me Too movement. And it was one of those movies that just became a victim of this company going bankrupt. It sold off its assets and is finally now coming out to theaters, which is different than the usual story we get where something is shelved and then somebody at their studio buys it or it eventually comes out. And you're like, oh, that's why that was shelved for, you know, 2 years or whatever. This one is like kind of through no fault of the film itself, is just now finally making its way out to theaters.
It just kept getting sold and sold and sold as different companies, you know, acquired it, and then it's finally found a home with a new distributor. I think it's 101. 101 Entertainment, I believe, is putting it out. And this is also fascinating because it's listed as The Current War, the director's cut. And I haven't read up enough on this, but I'm assuming it's because, you know, we were discussing how Weinstein loved to hack up people's movies and, you know, would take over and makes editing changes and stuff. So I wonder if a previous cut that was probably going to be released would have had a little bit of Weinstein all over it. And now they've let the director go back and de-Weinstein it. And now it is back to being his version. So. Yeah,
it was. We mentioned a few episodes ago back in the 90s, he had that Harvey Scissorhands moniker attached to him before far worse things got, you know, attached to him publicly. No, you're right. One article I was able to read about it said, I don't know if it's anecdotal or not, but it said that he was in the editing room working on this movie, Weinstein was, when the news broke. The first, I think it was the first New Yorker article that broke. So yeah, I think you're right there in that it seems like it, you know, okay, well, let's remove whatever he was doing, you know, give it back to the director, and now we're getting that film out there in theaters. Oh, which we should also mention stars Michael Shannon, Benedict Cumberbatch, Tom Holland. I mean, this is, you know, a stellar cast alone that makes you want to go see the movie. And we will be right back with the new films opening this week at the theater. Well, the first film we are opening this week is, I think we've mentioned on a couple shows now in a row, it's maybe a little odd on the surface to be playing at an art house theater, but it is Joker from co-writer and director Todd Phillips. This is a gritty character study of Arthur Fleck, a man disregarded by society, obviously eventually to become one of Batman's most famous rivals.
Arthur, I have some bad news for you. This is the last time we'll be meeting.
You don't listen, do you? You just ask the same questions every week. How's your job? Are you having any negative thoughts? All I have are negative thoughts.
And finally, in a world where everyone thinks they could do my job, check out this guy.
When I was a little boy and told people I was going to be a comedian, everyone laughed at me. Well, no one's laughing now.
You can say that again, pal.
Murray, one small thing.
Yeah.
When you bring me out, can you introduce me as Joker?
So, Dave, your first impressions, we mentioned before how, like, you know, Jack Nicholson playing the Joker, what? That's crazy. And then, you know, it's iconic. Then Heath Ledger's playing the Joker, what? That's crazy. And then it became iconic. Joaquin Phoenix doing a standalone Joker movie. I think at that point it didn't sound too crazy.
No, it doesn't sound crazy anymore because we've sort of been, you know, expecting sort of different takes on superhero lore and supervillains and things like that now. And I think given Joaquin Phoenix's sort of off-the-wall reputation that he's, you know, fostered over the years, him playing the Joker, and he's a great actor too. So can't wait to see what someone does with this role. So now we've seen two great actors do their own very unique kind of twist. Nicholson's was more of a kind of classic comic book version of the Joker, kind of a la like the TV show. And then you get, you know, a much darker version with Heath Ledger, and now I think we're going to get an even more darker and twisted version with Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, it's interesting how that sort of developed with this, because you have the Tim Burton one. Was that PG-13 or PG? I don't remember, because it was very
it was PG-13.
Okay, so but it's still like very comic booky, like you said, campy style, and then the grittier PG-13 of the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. And now this one's just straight up rated R, but we're going back to see sort of like the origin story rather than he's already the Joker and just slowly kind of like maybe he does, maybe he doesn't tell you a little bit of his backstory as the film progresses there. What was your feeling when you first heard about this project, though, and that it was being helmed by Todd Phillips as a director? Was it like anticipation, or was it like me where I was like, ugh, really?
No, I was like, that'll be very interesting to see what they come up with. And, I like whenever a talented director and a talented actor take on something that is, not necessarily what you'd expect from them. So I'm very anxious to see this. And I know some of the reviews, it's gotten a lot of great reviews, obviously won at the Venice Film Festival. So it's, pretty well received, but there's also some people that are not loving it. So it could be a divisive film. So if you come to see it this weekend, it's time to have your own opinion, and then you can join in the conversation.
Oh, yes. The wonderful conversations that take place on the internet after people have seen a divisive movie. It's always, always a rewarding experience. I was thinking about the conversations that happen in the Cedar Lee lobby. You know that.
For all the years working at the theater. As people come out of the theater, they can't wait to start talking about something. Whether they loved it or they hated it, you always get a very vocal opinion right as soon as people walk out of the auditorium.
I was going to say, usually, though, I've noticed the initial conversation starts with whether or not like they did or didn't like the very final scene. So I'm going to be very curious to see what the very final scene is for this one. There was, I remember a lot of reactions to Birdman. I'm not going to say anything about spoiler-wise, but the ending of that movie is, gives people a certain reaction. And they were like, oh, I hated this movie. And then you start talking to them, and they love everything about it except for, maybe their interpretation of the ending of that movie. So, like, I think just because it's the last thing you see, it does sort of flavor the start of the conversation you have afterwards a lot of times.
The next film we're opening is Honeyland, directed by Tamara Kotevska and Ljubomir Stefanov. And I apologize if I've not pronounced his name correctly. This is a film about the last female bee hunter in Europe who must save the bees and return the natural balance in Honeyland when a family of nomadic beekeepers invade her land and threaten her livelihood.
So, Dave, I put in the notes based on the quick premise of the movie that first we had water as a protagonist with Aquarella, and now we've got bees.
Right.
Obviously, it's more the bee hunter, I think, in this case, but it's really fascinating kind of documentations of nature that we're getting here in these non-music-based documentaries that are coming out.
Yeah, it is one of the most awarded films from the 2019 Sundance Film Festival, winning the World Cinema Doc Cinematography and the Grand Jury and Special Jury Awards. So it is, a beautiful movie that has it actually came out a couple months ago, I feel like, in New York and LA, and it's just finally, it's one of those ones, the dreaded platform release where it's taken this long for it to finally find its way to Cleveland. So I hope Clevelanders haven't forgotten about this film after hearing about it on NPR, reading about it in the New York Times, these many months ago. It's finally here, and it's one of the most well-reviewed and acclaimed movies of the year, so I hope you don't forget about it.
I feel like this one may be one of those that needs to be timed when it gets presumably like the eventual like best documentary nominations, and it has a bit more like the critics end of the year thing. So hopefully it doesn't fall through the cracks this time of year, but it has all the hallmarks of like one of those end of the year, oh, everybody missed this amazing documentary kind of film. It's also a tough one too, because like we said with Aquarella, which was like a beautiful nature documentary and exploration of the role just water plays in human existence on the planet right now, that this one hitting the bees and colony collapse have been a subject of many documentaries, several that played at the theater over the years. And this kind of comes at it from a slightly different point of view, but still is like, a vital, meditative look at the role that humans play and how we're connected to nature in general, but also clearly like a big screen kind of movie. The first couple scenes, if you just watch the trailer, are just gorgeous and aren't going to work as well on your laptop or your, God forbid, your phone or something in your living room. It's a big screen kind of experiential film.
Which is why it won the cinematography award.
Yeah, for good reason. The last film we're opening is a kind of family comedy of errors. It is Before You Know It from co-writer, actor, and director Hannah Pearl Oot. It is a pair of sisters find out that their mother, that they thought was dead, is actually alive and starring on a soap opera.
Your mom?
She's dead.
Why is a soap actress the co-owner of our building?
Oh my god, here's what she looks like.
Looks a lot like you.
You want to meet her right now?
Yes!
You do not want to meet this woman? No.
Well, we're not going to get another shot in, so that's lunch.
Come on, guys. That's it for now.
We don't know her.
She's our mother. This is awful.
I can come up with a good storyline.
If you do that, I would give you my firstborn.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah.
I'm a coward.
I have to learn how to be an adult.
You do not want my mom as your mom. Is she funny? Not on purpose.
I know that you're processing a lot right now. I just don't want you to get arrested. I'm calling the cops.
What is your name, ma'am? How is that pronounced? Rhonda.
So this film is played at the film festival and Sundance, and it's got a great supporting cast with Alec Baldwin, Mandy Patinkin, and Judith Light is probably the reason to see this movie. Her performance as the mother, who's the soap opera star, is, you know, a typically kind of wonderfully vain aging actress who's trying to still remain relevant. And whenever she finds out the soap opera is going to write her into a coma, you know, she's trying to like struggle to figure out a way to, you know, keep them from, you know, killing her character off. And, you know, she's known she's had these daughters, but they didn't know that their mom was still alive, even though she's been in the background involved in their life. They didn't realize that. So it's an interesting little story about these two sisters kind of dealing with the passing of their father and discovering that they have a mom that they never knew they had.
So I realized I meant to look this up because the name Judith Light rang familiar, but I didn't go to IMDb to check. I was like, why do I know Judith Light as a name?
She was most known for her work on Who's the Boss?
Right.
You know, yeah.
Okay.
But she's been doing a lot of really interesting kind of fun character work in films, and this is another
one
great,
of those
little role for her. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I printed out our notes for the show, and I was like, I meant to look that up because like that name rang a bell, but it's been a while for me since I've seen her in something. Well, we will be right back with our Cedarly 3 picks for this week. Well, each week we like to take inspiration from one of the new films that is opening, and we suggest 3 films to broaden your cinematic world. This week's topic is inspired by Joker, the Todd Phillips, Joaquin Phoenix take on the iconic anti-hero, we're going to say, from the Batman and DC universe. So this week's topic is anti-heroes/heroines.
Mm-hmm.
That is an interesting topic because there's a lot of times having just, as I mentioned at the top of the show, watching King of Comedy, anti-heroes are generally like, obviously they're not traditional protagonists, but I feel like they still need to elicit a bit of audience identification or at least sympathy to kind of go along with their plight. But as I was putting together my list, it was like there's a bunch that just don't that really just alienate the audience with their actions. Well, I guess I should say hopefully, depending on who you are watching the movie. But
right,
it's kind of interesting looking at the list. There are definitely some that you're there for their whole plight, which is what sort of looks like what they're doing with this Joker film. Is you're sort of seeing why he becomes who he eventually becomes. Whether or not you necessarily agree with his decisions says something about yourself, I think. But a lot of the times with these movies, it does sort of elicit the audience to like come along on the journey. And then just by spending time with that person and seeing how they become who they become, you are kind of inadvertently on their side. I don't know if did that ring true for how you were looking at this list, Dave, or?
No, I think that when I was coming up with this list, it's like I wanted them my rules were they had to be sort of the main characters of the film.
Right.
And they didn't have to be, they didn't really have to be likable, nor did you really have to be cheering for them completely, but they had to be sort of, it's sort of like whenever the villain of a movie is the main character, and that's why you're on their side, because they're the character they're the story that is being told. So that was my kind of rule. Oh, so and I certainly there's elements to these people that I would identify with, but there's certainly I can't endorse any of their overall behaviors.
Oh, so you did not pick the Ben Stiller classic Greenberg then on your list?
Oh, why do you have to bring that movie up? Well, I feel like I should maybe like whatever, I should look up the release date, the original release date of Greenberg, and every year I should like sneak into a library and just accidentally scratch or break a copy of the movie to prevent people.
A different library each
tradition.
year?
Yeah, a little bit of antisocial like behavior, but,
cinematic vigilante work.
Yeah, I would never do that. If someone wants to watch that movie, they've been warned and they can suffer through it like I did. All right, so the first film on my list was one of my favorite movies from 2014. It's Dan Gilroy's Nightcrawler with
nice.
Jake Gyllenhaal as Louis Bloom. He is just a terrible human being. He starts out as this sort of, like petty criminal scrap, trying to like steal scrap metal kind of thing, and discovers that there's this whole industry of selling, video that you shoot at crime scenes to TV stations because, they want to have the goriest, best footage to put on the news. And he becomes this guy that puts himself in these situations at any cost, and ultimately sometimes even creating scenarios to get the footage that he needs. And it's just a fantastic performance by Jake Gyllenhaal. It's an incredible script. It was Oscar nominated, and rightfully so. It's just a great film, and certainly a despicable human being. But, you kind of cheer for him for being such a dirtbag.
Yeah, that was just on the edge of being on my list. Just it was one of those like unredeemable, like you can't. It's kind of like a car crash thing. Like you can't look away from him in that role, and you watch him just devolve over time. And you're just like, this is an unredeemable human being. But it does. It balances that fine line of just like you still want to watch it though, and you still are kind of like roped in, which is sort of the point of that narrative too. Like you said, the script is very biting in that way because it kind of implicates the audience in on the crimes in this case. The first one I want to mention is, I guess, sort of similar to that. I thought of There'll Be Blood, Daniel Plainview, and the iconic Daniel Day-Lewis role from Paul Thomas Anderson's 2007 film, which, he starts off as just, like the prospector. It's like a 20-minute, pretty much like silent performance during the opening of the movie, and you just watch him slowly be degraded by what, greed and, laser focus on the things that kind of really don't matter as much in life. And he's completely irredeemable by the end of the movie. Well, he's irredeemable not by the end of the movie. It's a build there, but by the time you get to the end, you're just like completely unredeemable human. No one would ever want to actually hang out with this guy. But similar to Gyllenhaal's character in Nightcrawler, where like you can't look away though when he's on screen. He's just like such a force on screen. Yeah. You can't not be engaged by his central performance there.
Yeah, it's an amazing movie. I love that movie. I've seen it. I can't even tell you how many times. It's just got a great performance by Daniel Day-Lewis, and just some of the great I Drink Your Milkshake has become a meme. So,
yeah.
It's interesting how the elements of that film just have stayed around in pop culture. So it's kind of made its mark for sure.
Well, watching that movie the first time and you saw the milkshake scene the first time, were you picturing like, oh, that'll get a T-shirt someday?
No,
there's no way. There's no reason why that plot or even that scene like should be that engaging or that rewatchable. But it is. It's a testament to the entire team of craftsmen that worked on that film. But definitely like that central role and the direction, I say, or the the top two reasons. But.
Well, the next film on my list is another movie by one of my favorite filmmakers, Alexander Payne's 1999 comedy Election, with Reese Witherspoon as Tracy Flick, the stop at anything high schooler that is going to win the class presidency no matter what. And it's got a great kind of also almost like an anti-hero performance as well by
Matthew
Broderick as the teacher, kind of trying to stop her. And so it's I love that movie. It's still laugh out loud funny to me. I think it's amazing how well that's held up. It's just so smart. She's brilliant in it. I love everything she does about it. She's a great actress, and that movie just kills me. So it's one of my favorites.
Well, it's one of those two that works perfectly as a metaphor too, like it's a budding sociopath who's like seeking power, and Matthew Broderick, you're like, why am I cheering for somebody to destroy a student? Like this feels very weird, but it is almost like two central anti-hero roles though.
Yeah, budding sociopath that oddly enough ends up in Washington.
Right? So, what a shock!
It's great.
I would say one of the first few that I thought of when I was thinking of this topic is actually a character that sort of transcends just one movie. It's the character of Elizabeth Salander that Stieg Larsson originally created for his Millennium trilogy of books, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Girl Play with Fire, Girl Kicked a Hornet's Nest, but then was adapted in Sweden and had been adapted here stateside too. So I think like that character in general is just like the cyberpunk activist who's, you know, becomes vigilante because the system itself is failing her on multiple fronts throughout her entire life. It's just such a iconic, empowering character that has now it's even gone off. Like Stieg Larsson tragically has passed away very early, and it's going on with like a new author and another series of books. So like the character is that strong, and every book that comes out is a bestseller. It was a full adaptation over in Sweden. Fincher did the adaptation here in America in Hollywood in 2011, and I wouldn't even try to like rate or pick which performances are the best. There was also there's the other American film which I totally forgot about. That Claire Foy played the character as well too, which I did not see. But no, that character becomes an anti-hero because she has to go outside the law and become a vigilante on her own to seek retribution and justice. But then also kind of manipulates the system as well because she's immensely talented hacker and is able to kind of manipulate the system to get what she feels is justice in the long run.
Well, just like we were talking about how Tracy Flick is sort of like potentially like a budding sociopath, the last film on my list features two full-blown sociopaths.
Oh, good.
And that's Oliver Stone's 1994 Natural Born Killers with Mickey and Mallory Knox, played by Woody Harrelson, and of course the fantastically, wonderfully weird, as always, Juliette Lewis, and Rodney Dangerfield as her father. I just love that movie. It is an extremely divisive movie, and it is just an ugly movie. I mean, Oliver Stone did such a good job of making that film just visually disgusting and just repugnant in every possible way, as you have this modern sort of Bonnie and Clyde characters, if Bonnie and Clyde were not just bank robbers but were just stone cold like killers and so full-blown sociopaths.
Oh yeah,
and you are sort of rooting for Mickey and Mallory to make it, and Robert Downey Jr. is in it as the Australian TV journalist guy. It's got a lot of great elements to it, and as far as filmmaking goes, it's Oliver Stone, when he does that sort of he has a couple of different styles that he can in his arsenal, and this is him at his sort of like flashiest, multi-formats, quick edits, just weird angles, different film stocks. Just it's a really interesting kind of film exercise as well.
It's even got animation in it too. I think maybe there's like a similar dividing line between De Niro's career and Stone's career, where maybe a pre-2000 Oliver Stone is different than the more recent Oliver Stone. So if you're, like I would say mid-20s or younger, go back to the early Oliver Stone. There's some really, really spectacular films in his filmography that are worth visiting with. As you mentioned in performances, the Juliette Lewis performance, I kept thinking of watching King of Comedy the other day because Sandra Bernhard has that same just like kinetic, unhinged kind of personality in so many films that like I can't picture either of them playing like the subdued like housewife or like romantic lead. Like there's a certain type of role that they're attracted to that I think they really excel at.
Did you not see The Other Sister?
I did actually a couple times, and she is terrible in that one. Natural Born Killers though also has my favorite like scenery chewing Tommy Lee Jones role probably of all time as the prison warden, who's just spectacular.
Oh yeah, that's great.
And if you do watch Natural Born Killers, please watch the director's cut of that one.
Yes. And it's interesting because it's a story by Quentin Tarantino, which I like to think, I don't know, I've never read enough about this to know if he wrote like a full script or if it was just like he kind of really did a sort of like outline and then some wrote the screenplay. But if there is like an original Tarantino screenplay out there, that would be very interesting to see how different that was.
So I bought the novelization of that movie when it came out because I was obsessed with the movie and I was obsessed with Oliver Stone at the time. And if I'm going off memory, because I read the novelization a couple times, it's like original story by. So I'm guessing it's one of those like extended treatments.
Right. That's what I mean.
Well, the last one, I don't need to belabor too long. It's, to me, like the most iconic anti-hero in film history, and that's Taxi Driver from 1976. Clearly an inspiration, and Todd Phillips, the director and co-writer of Joker, has said so. One of his inspirations for the film Joker is the Travis Bickle Vietnam vet turned cab driver turned vigilante within his own seedy neighborhood. Which, like, it's an oddly, I don't know if I want to say inspiring, but like it goes into some extremely dark territory about isolation and mental health and the way that society treats its veterans. And it's also an era of New York City that doesn't exist right now. That was just like that 70s, just like gritty,
dirty.
Yeah. And that Bernard Herrmann score and the cinematography, the Paul Schrader script, like it all just came together so perfectly. But is oddly redemptive in a way by the end. It's a really fascinating film that obviously is not some obscure movie I'm referencing here. So it's Taxi Driver. It's one of the great anti-hero roles.
If you haven't seen it yet, it should be at the top of your list.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a masterpiece.
Yep. All right, so next week's episode, we'll be discussing Manos, The Other Story, and El Camino, a Breaking Bad film. Our Cedarly 3 picks are inspired by El Camino. We're going to take a look at great car films and all that can entail. Submit your picks at Cedarly Theater using the hashtag Cedarly3, the number 3. But before we sign off for this week, we do want to let you know about a few special events we have coming your way.
The first film we've got coming up is part of the Melt Bar and Grilled Late Shift. We're showing the classic Stephen King and John Carpenter film Christine. That's going to be playing Saturday, October 5th at 9:30 p.m. and midnight, and Sunday, October 6th at 7 p.m. And that also ties in perfectly with our theme of next week of car movies.
I was going to say, kind of unintended tie-in there.
Unintended.
About that, yeah. Or no, it was totally intended. It was totally intended.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which also means it's the first of the month, so we'll be showing the Rocky Horror Picture Show as well on Saturday, October 5th at, we'll say, 11:59 p.m., just to avoid any confusion there.
And then we have an encore presentation of the National Theatre Live's classic production One Man, Two Governors, starring James Corden. That's on Sunday, October 6th at 11 a.m. And if you haven't seen it, it's a fantastic play, and James Corden actually won a Tony and I believe the Olivier for that as well. And then that same week, we also have Metallica S&M 2, which is playing Wednesday, October 9th at 7 p.m. This is a concert featuring Metallica with the San Francisco Orchestra.
And the last event we have this week is Mr. America. It's a one-night-only special event, Wednesday, October 9th at 7:30 p.m., featuring a pre-recorded Q&A with co-writer and star Tim Heidecker. As always, thank you for tuning in to Cedarly Radio and lending us your ears this week. All the music heard on the show is original music written by Grant Heineman and performed by the New Heights Jazz Ensemble, used with their permission, of course. Visit clevelandcinemas.com for correct showtimes and to purchase advance tickets. Also, there are links in the show notes. You can use those if you'd like as well. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Cedarly Theater, spelled with an R-E at the end because we're fancy like that. Don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcast, and while you're subscribing, leave us a rating and review, or better yet, tell a fellow film geek about the show. We'll see you at the movies.